Hi, Aaron and everyone else. My name is Mick Parker. This is my home tape audition for King of the Nerds. I'm 23, and right now I live in Austin, Texas, but I just moved here, and I am originally from Jacksonville, Arkansas. Let's see. So, type of nerd that I am. I am a mythology nerd. And I say that, I say mythology instead of classics, because I'm actually really bad at Latin, like really terrible, and I'm even worse at Greek. I was a classics major in college, but I was also a double major, and my other major was theater. So my thesis was called A Meaty Cracking Shock, and it was an examination of violence in the works of Antonin Artaud, who is a theater theorist. He was French. You've probably heard of him. You probably know lots about him, actually. But see, the thing about Artaud is that he used to be really fine. Like, back in the day, he was in the silent Joan of Arc, which I've never seen because I can't do silent movies, but maybe you've seen it. And he was gorgeous. He was just really gorgeous. I think he played, like, a guard or something. He had a pretty small role, I believe. Anyway, by the time he was, like, 42, he'd written some theoretical works, and he had been living in an asylum for a while, and his teeth had fallen out, and, girl, he did not look good. He looked like he was 86. But anyway, he wrote about violence in the theater. I analyzed the use of violence in Seneca the Younger's tragedies. Now, Seneca the Younger, you probably know him too. He was a Stoic, he was a philosopher, he was a dramatist, he was a man about town. No one likes his tragedies except Artaud, and Seneca's tragedies were like his favorite things ever. So, let's see. So I basically talked about violence in both of their works. And then I wrote this play about the Cumaean Sibyl from the Aeneid. Did I mention I went to Reed College? Oh, I don't know. But I went to Reed College. Anyway, and I wrote about the Cumaean Sibyl from the Aeneid. Oh, and by the way, this is the only pillow that I brought from Arkansas. You see, when I moved here, I only brought one suitcase. And I know you told me to, like, show off all my interests, which I would love to do because I have so much cool, nerdy stuff. But I brought one suitcase. So, but this made the cut, freakishly enough. This is Edward. He's a cat pillow. I'm allergic to cats, but I love them. So I brought this pillow. I also brought this record. I know, what a weird thing to bring. I don't even have a record player, is the really sad thing. But it's the Pope singing. And really, how can you get better than the Pope singing? I don't think you can. And look at this homosexual, like, pink glow. Oh my god, what could be better, right? I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. So my first play that I wrote was about the Cumaean Sibyl. She's a prophetess of Apollo, and, you know, one of the things you asked is, what's one thing that if you could debate about, you know you'd win? I would debate that Apollo is a jerk. And I don't know if I'm allowed to use strong language on this video, but I will say he's a big jerk. He's awful. Serious. So what I'm basing that on is a bunch of things. But first, Cumaean Sibyl, really strong woman. She leads Aeneas to the underworld. I think I've said that 3 times. But it's really impressive because no one else could do that but her, okay? And mostly she's a prophetess, though. Like, people come from all over the world, and they say, oh, Apollo, what should I do? And he basically possesses her and then speaks through her and prophesies, right? But that's not all it is. Like, people act like, oh, she's, you know, being possessed and it's ecstasy and she loves it. No, she does not love it. Anyone who reads the Latin, which even with my very poor skills, I did. I read the entire of Book 6 because it's so good. The Aeneid's a really good book. Or I should say poem. And he possesses her, but it's always sexual. It's like, it always, they use words like he fills her up or he instills himself in her. And then she is full. They use that word, like, fool. Sorry if this is a little graphic, but it's, you know, it's my work. And then she basically ejaculates his prophecy. And the entire time she fights him. They compare her to, like, a horse fighting the bit and all these, like, animal metaphors. And it's really terrible. Once you really know what you're reading, it's basically a description of a rape scene. That happens every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And the worst part about it is, this is not in the book, but it's in the mythology. When Apollo first saw the Cumaean Sibyl, who in my play I named Sibyl, because I guess I'm a nerd and not a creative nerd, I don't know, she was like, I don't want to have sex with you, which is kind of odd, because everyone always wants to have sex with Apollo, but, you know, whatever, maybe she's a lesbian, you know, and she was like, I don't want to have sex with you, and he was like, well, I'll give you anything you want, which the gods do all the time. And sometimes it leads to their death, like Semele, Bacchus's mother. Zeus was like, I'll give you anything you want. And she was like, I want to see you in your full glory, which is also in the Bible, isn't it? Doesn't Moses ask that, and then God's like, no, thank you, because you'll die? Or maybe he does die. I don't know. I have to say, Bible, I grew up in the South. I kind of got turned off fast. Anyway, so Semele was like, oh, I'd love to see you in your full glory, and then she bursts into flame, and Zeus has to sew Bacchus into his thigh, which is, it's all his fault, really. Oh, I bought this, it was given to me, actually, by the mother of one of my friends. Is that not the fiercest thing you've ever seen? I'm sorry, I don't have much to show and tell, but this is fierce, okay? Anyway. So the combined symbol was like, okay, going back, I hope I'm not being too confusing. She was like, okay, Apollo, I want to live forever. And he was like, okay, now let's have sex. And they did. And then after they had sex, he was like, guess what? And she was like, what? And he was like, well, you can live forever, but you won't be young forever. Ha 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 ha. And then, because he's a jerk. He rode away. And so basically her fate is to grow older and older until she's some dust in a jar and a disembodied voice, being raped every day along the way. I mean, it's awful. But she's such a strong and wonderful character. Her story is sad, but she is very strong. Anyway, so I wrote about her for my thesis. And right now I'm working on a play called The Immortals, which is about, it's sort of like her story, but much bigger, because it's about a bunch of mortals who are made immortal against their will. So Ganymede, who was, captured by the eagle, which was Zeus, and taken up to heaven to be the cupbearer, sexual plaything of Zeus. So he just has to, live up there like carrying around the wine all day, which you could pretend he really enjoys, but let's be serious, he does not enjoy that. He was a Trojan prince. He does not want to be a cupbearer all day, even to the gods. And I include like Juturna from the Aeneid. She's Turnus' sister. I don't know. No one ever reads the second half of the Aeneid, which, fair enough. Why would you? It's pretty boring. But even though I love it, it's vastly inferior to the first half. And Juturna is Turnus' sister. Turnus fights Aeneas for Lavinia and some land, and then Turnus dies. And Juturna has been made immortal. She's like a demigod, kind of. And so she fights to try to save her brother. She changes her form and pretends to be it doesn't matter. I'm not going to explain the entire Aeneid, because that would be boring to everyone but me. But she's immortal, and Turnus is dead, and she loved Turnus. So she's going to be a sad person. And the two Gorgons, Medusa's sister, Medusa could turn people to stone with her snaky eye hair crap. But she was not immortal. Her two sisters were immortal, and they couldn't do the stone thing. So, I don't know. So, Medusa, of course, was killed, and then her head was carried off and put on a shield, which is pretty brutal. And so her sisters just have to live without her. And there are a couple others. I bring the Sibyl back for a scene. And anyway, so that's the play that I'm working on right now. I was high school valedictorian. That doesn't matter at this point because I'm a grown man. But as far as talking about my geekiness, I decided I was going to be valedictorian when I was in 6th grade, and it certainly happened. And in my valedictorian speech, it was all about I actually have a copy on my computer, but I'm not going to read that to you because that's just pathetic. But I talk about how you have to be yourself, and you have to totally just ignore what everyone else tells you, screw everyone else. I said, basically. And then, my list of heroes included, all the boring, Beethoven and blah, 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 and Bill Gates, who's, Steve Jobs, and then people like Superman and Wonder Woman and Batman. People who did their own thing. Anyway. So, besides being a mythology nerd, I'm sort of like a modern mythology nerd as well, if that makes any sense. I love RPGs. My favorite, now I never had a PlayStation, somehow I just missed out, but my favorite RPG of all time, so I never played Final Fantasy is what I was getting at there. My favorite RPG of all time is Shining Force on Sega Genesis. I don't know if you've ever played it. It is freaking awesome. And it's beautiful. Sega Genesis graphics are gorgeous. They're rich, they're like jewel tones. I have all three. I think there are actually 4 Shining Force games, but one is on the Sega Genesis with the CD, which I never had. But I have 3 of them, and one of them sucks, but 2 of them are amazing, and you should go play them if you like RPGs. I'm not even kidding. They're amazing. I like trashy fantasy. I also like good fantasy, Lord of the Rings and Chronicles of Narnia, The Wheel of Time. It's amazing. Actually, I just checked out a book So I don't have any books here, because they're heavy, and I had one suitcase. But the first thing I did when I got here was go get a library card, because I am intense about the library. And this is a pretty lame book. But I checked out The Green Man, Tales from the Mythic Forest. And I don't know. There's a green man in the Wheel of Time. You remember he's like in the first book, and he like fights one of the Forsaken, and he kills them, but then he dies himself. They call him something else, but he's basically a green man, like a man, like an ent, basically, is what they are. Did you know that in one of the earlier versions of Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, there is an evil ent? Because there's like the evil forest, kind of. But I was reading this book, which is put together by Christopher Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien's son, who's like his executor of his literary whatever. And he included, it's this book of like how Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings. And he included all the extra notes, and all the stuff got cut out. And there was an ent that lived by the Shire that was evil and in league with Sauron. Is that crazy? Anyway, let me see. So yeah, fantasy, Shining Forest, mythology, occupation. I think I say I'm a playwright. I tend to spend a lot of time working in restaurants and doing things I don't enjoy. But that's the life of an artist or a wannabe artist. My best quality would probably be my optimistic attitude. My worst quality would definitely be that I am an intense introvert. I can put it on, and I enjoy people to an extent, but I would always rather be at home, which I think is a big reason, and you guys asked me to talk about this, so I will. Here's another library book, I am gay, and I always try to check out at least one queer book, because I love queer literature. And I think part of the reason I don't have a boyfriend, and I've never really had a boyfriend, is I fell in love with one boy and didn't love me back. It was so crushing. But mostly, I don't mean to sound like an asshole, but I'm just pretty unimpressed with the boys that I meet. Sometimes they're gorgeous. There are lots of gorgeous men out there. But as far as, like, a boy's mind, I very rarely find a guy who I'm like, wow, we could talk. I want to talk to you because I feel like you would understand, and I wouldn't bore you. I hate feeling like I bore people. I hope I'm not boring you now. Though I read somewhere recently, no one ever asked you if they're boring you unless they are boring you. Which I think is actually kind of true, so I wish I hadn't just asked that, because then maybe I made you bored just by asking it. Whatever. Some other books that I checked out from the library, and keep in mind, this was before I even heard about King of the Nerds, which I just saw on Craigslist while I was looking for a job. Norton Anthology of Classical Literature. Now, I will not read this whole thing because I do not like Herodotus, and Thucydides is okay. The historians in general are not great, but I bet they have... Oh, they do. They have a bunch of stuff from the Oresteia and from various Greek and Roman playwrights, and so I'm totally down. I love Greek and Roman theater. Have you ever read these very short introductions? These are so good! They're basically like... They're not just collections of information. They're actually like little stories. They'll talk about like a certain artifact that's been lost and found, and they'll like structure their entire book around that artifact, or like a certain theory, or blah blah blah. So even if you know something pretty well, as I know classics relatively well, there's still a lot to learn. And plus, Mary Beard is one of the editors and writers, and she is a goddess. And I checked out The Last Song of Orpheus, which is a modern retelling of the Orpheus myth, which I think is a great idea. Oh my god, comic books. This is obviously what I do in my plays, so I enjoy modern retellings. Comic books. Another modern mythology. I love the X-Men. I don't like Wolverine very much, because he's like an alpha male straight guy, and I just don't do that. I enjoy the Sandman a whole lot. Speaking of Orpheus, there's an Orpheus mini saga in there. I enjoy The Invisibles. I don't know if you ever read that, but it's fabulous. It's all about it's about many things, but there's a character called Lord Fanny, who's this transgender South American shaman. Or priestess. I don't know. Well, she's transgender. She's fabulous. Anyway, I think I've talked about everything I need to talk about. I didn't think I could talk for 15 minutes, but look, I'm definitely doing it. I have lots of nerdy glasses that I wear, even though they're all fake. And I hope to hear from you soon. Okay, that's it.